Organizations of Student Activities. And this is the SOLD workshop, Passing the Torch Officer Transition. So thanks you all for coming. Okay, so these are just some things that we're going to learn during this workshop. So we're going to learn how to utilize internal practices so you can keep your organization sustainable and so things are kind of moving and there's not any gaps in what is happening in your organization. You're going to learn how to create and kind of maintain an effective leadership transition process, and also learn how to prepare incoming officers for their responsibilities of the new positions and what that process kind of looks like. All right, so why is this transition process important? And I'm sure y'all could attest to many of these, but the first one is we want to just kind of transfer that important organizational information and knowledge. So there's a lot of things that you've probably learned as an officer in your organization now, and how many, I guess, are current officers or are incoming? So I guess incoming or outgoing. So for outgoing officers, you've probably learned a lot during your time, so you want to make sure that all that information that you have learned, that you're transferring that to those new officers. You want to kind of inform and prepare those new officers for their positions, build up their confidence. You want to make sure you're giving them as much information and knowledge that you can, so that they feel ready to kind of conquer their new role. You also want to provide a sense of accomplishment to those outgoing officers, so they've kind of done their time and done a great job, obviously, of keeping your organization afloat, and so you want to make sure that you're giving them kind of that closure and kind of recognizing them for the things that they've done in their positions, whether it was a semester, 2 semesters, however long it's been. And you want to use their experience to your advantage. You also want to provide a sense of community among leadership and your membership. So oftentimes there may be kind of your leadership, your officers, your exec board, and your memberships, and things are separate. But as new officers, you guys were probably just members this last year, and so you want to have kind of a seamless transition from being a member to being an officer, but making sure that that transition is good for the whole organization. And you don't want to lose momentum. So you've probably built up things throughout the year, throughout the semesters. Maybe you've increased your membership, or you are doing a lot more events than your organization was doing when you came on as an officer. You don't want to lose that momentum. You want to kind of keep things going how they are going. All right, so I'm going to mention the 5 W's. I'm sure you guys all know what they are: who, what, where, when, why. So I just want to mention them here, and I want you to think about them as we're going through all these slides, and we're going to kind of come back to them at the end, because I think this is a good reminder of how you can think about your position and how you can think about, as an outgoing officer, what do those incoming officers need to, who do they need to know, what do they need to know, where, when, why. And so we'll kind of come back to this at the end, but I wanted you to think about those 5 W's as we are going through the slides. Okay, so as an outgoing officer, these are kind of some of your responsibilities and things that you will need to do in order to make sure that incoming officer is ready for their position. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to review the previous year. You're going to want to go over what goals did you have set? Did you achieve them? If not, why not? Kind of go over those goals first. You want to go over events. So what happened at those events? What was your part in them? What went well? What didn't go well? What could be changed? And kind of give them a summary of that. Membership. So maybe you had a new process for taking in new members. Maybe you have new membership requirements. Maybe you thought of some inventive ways to recruit members, or had a new tactic to recruit members, and you're maybe going and doing more tabling or things. Finances, so what financially happened within your organization in the last year, and that's important information. You want to make sure that you're leaving those new officers in good financial standing, hopefully, and with a positive balance, and that everything is taken care of on the financial front. What resources do they need to know? What policies or procedures do they need to know? And kind of review Org Sync as well. What did you learn from Org Sync? Or if you have a website or things that you use, what did you learn from that? So review all those kind of pieces that may have come into play during your position. You're going to want to update any documents or things that you have. So I know that some organizations are, and let's see, which organizations are y'all representing? What organization you're representing?
So IEEE Computer Science.
Okay. Okay.
Security Club and Activities.
Okay, so you're in a few, in which organization?
Professional Women's Council.
Okay. Okay, and I know y'all are a fairly new organization. One of your organizations is fairly new. So y'all might not have as many documents and things that you have created yet, but what you do have, we want to make sure that you're updating those. Review your officer responsibilities. So, and everyone has a constitution and has set out responsibilities for each officer position. Make sure those are outlined. Make sure you're reviewing them. If there needs to be edits to be made or suggestions to be made, this is a good time to do that. Think about a timeline. So think about each month, what did you do and what would the new officer need to know in each month. So maybe you are the person who registers your organization each semester. So you know that every July and August, July-August time and late November, early December that you're going to have to get your organization registered. So that's going to be something that you're going to want to let that new officer know. So kind of what is the timeline of things that is going on with your position. Take care of any unfinished business. So if your organization has outstanding balances with the university, or maybe you're in the middle of planning a large event for the spring, you need to make sure that you're kind of communicating what has happened to this point and what's going to need to happen to the next point. Or maybe you're planning something for the fall. So just make sure you're taking care of any unfinished business, or at least communicating that information to that next officer so that they are prepared, they have all the documents, the contacts, and things that they need. Maybe some do's and don'ts. I'm sure you've probably learned something as an outgoing officer. I'm sure you've learned many things. So giving them kind of, some, hey, do this worked really great, or hey, we tried this really did not work for our organization. I would not suggest using money to do this, it just did not work. So thinking about kind of the do's and don'ts and things that did and did not work throughout the year. Any questions about any of the outgoing? Or anything you want to add as an outgoing officer?
Not really, I mean, I hit most of them, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say, and this is kind of, we'll add to that. So when we're talking about the 5 W's, who, what, where, when, why, some of these things fall into that. So what documents or what things are they going to need access to? I run into this every semester, especially when new organizations are registering again. Those new officers don't have access to their portal in OrgSync, or they don't have access to the most updated version of their constitution. They don't have an updated version uploaded, and they never got access to the Google Doc that they had been working on. So what do they need access to? Transition binder. I would highly recommend you all putting in documents and things and collecting things for each officer position and having a binder for each position or some type of folder that you can kind of pass on for each person. And that can include some transition information. Everyone should have access and needs a copy of the Constitution and bylaws. Every officer should have a copy of that. So make sure that they have access to that most updated copy. Any other governing documents you may have, if you work with a national, does anyone work with a national headquarters or a regional headquarters? So if you do, or you come into a situation, maybe you're an officer of another organization, it might be good to have, make sure you have the documents from the national headquarters that you may need. OrgSync, make sure you have access to OrgSync, especially if you're going to be the one updating the profile for registration or needing to submit forms or submit event applications. You're going to need access to do all those things. So make sure as an outgoing person, you're giving those new officers those permissions. Emails, so some of our organizations will have a generic email account, president something at gmail.com. So make sure you're giving access to them for the email accounts. Social media, Google Docs, any of those kind of social media outlets or other kind of, internet-based sources that you may use that you may need to give them access to. If you have an organization calendar, some obviously use Google Calendar, or if you have a calendar that you all follow, make sure that they have access to that and that's updated. Financial documents. So if you're going to be an officer, is anyone going to be a treasurer? No? Okay. Or maybe an event planner. Some of our event planners will have access to finances as the president. So if you're one of those officers and you're going to need access to your bank account, make sure that you are getting that submitted early. We have a checking account verification request form on OrgSync that someone currently on the checking account or bank account has to submit to add new people to that account, new officers and or advisors. So make sure before you leave as an officer, or those officers leave before you all come in, that you guys get that access. Especially if they're going to be graduating, you don't want them to say adios in May and leave and you don't have access to that account. So that does happen. And then previous meeting minutes or notes or agendas or things that you've taken from meetings, exec meetings, things like that. Those are all documents that you should keep, have access to, and it can just be passed down from exec board or leadership to the next leadership. And then contact lists. So think about all the people that were beneficial for you to know during your time. I would say your advisor should definitely be a person that you should put on that contact list. But who were others that were helpful was, if you had someone that you worked with in a certain department to do something, if you kind of sponsored something with them, or if there was businesses that you got donations from around Denton, those would all be contacts that you would want the next person to know about, so that those are already established relationships and they won't have to build new relationships again and can use those. So make sure that they have all the contacts that they need. Any questions about any of those? Okay. All right, so incoming officers. So incoming officers are going to be taking in a lot of information. It's going to be a lot, but just a few things that I think are important. The first one is to ask questions. So while you're either meeting with this person one-on-one or however you all decide to do that transition, make sure that you are asking questions. So what are the most important priorities would be a great question. So maybe as a member you may have thought something was more highly important than something else, but this officer lets you know, no, it's really important that we get this done. So that will help us get more money for the next event or whatever it may be. What did you try that did not work and why? That's a great question. So ask them those questions. Ask them what did they wish they had done but they did not. So there may be things that they had planned to do. Maybe they had set some goals and had planned to hold a certain event or philanthropy or fundraise or do certain things, and they just weren't able to do that, especially with kind of new organizations. Y'all are just building up each semester. So there might have been things that they wish they had done that they did not. Set SMART goals. Has everyone set SMART goals before? You heard of SMART goals? So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely goals. So set some goals for yourself as an officer, and I think it would be great as however many officers you have, if you have kind of like a small exec board or group of leadership, that you set some goals as a group as well, so that you kind of have some things to strive for that next year. And then what are those new ideas that you have for the position? This is your time to bring new ideas, especially if you're a member coming in as an officer. There may be things that you wish that they would have done or maybe included members in, and so those are all great things that you can now bring to the position. Any questions about incoming officer responsibilities? Okay, so other things to consider. Timeline is important. So I think a lot of the issues that come into play when there's maybe not a smooth transition is a lot of times it comes into play when there's just a bad timeline. It's just bad timing for the organization. So maybe it's at the end of the year and there's not enough time for that incoming person to get all the information they need from the outgoing person, especially if that person's leaving. They don't have access to them after they graduate or leave campus for the summer. So timing is really important. And one of the things that I would say, or I would suggest, is to maybe overlap your positions or create kind of a shadowing time period for that new officer. So have elections, and maybe those new officers are elected, at one point, but maybe have like kind of a 6 week or 4 to 6 week shadowing process or something where they can kind of get an idea of how things are going and can learn things and ask questions as that current officer is still in office. Another thing to consider is plan a retreat for outgoing and incoming officers. This is a great way for everyone to, everyone says, oh yeah, I'm going to really spend the time to sit down, make sure I give all the information to the next person, but we all get busy and school happens, life happens, things happen. But if you plan a retreat focused around all of these things, that's really going to give everyone, everyone's going to be in a good mindset and really be able to focus on ensuring that these new officers are prepared and have gotten the information that they need. So train the officers, plan, and bond. Like this is also a time, maybe have the outgoing officers come at the beginning, train, help you plan kind of some upcoming things, and then let them go and then let those new incoming officers have a chance to kind of bond as a new group of officers. Create checklists or worksheets for incoming and outgoing officers. So this is very simple. There's a million templates on Google if you're interested in doing something like that. But basically having kind of a checklist or a worksheet so that each outgoing and incoming officer has one that they need to complete during the transition process to ensure that all that information has been provided to them. And then, like I said before, create a transition binder for each position. That'll make things easy. If someone creates a checklist or a worksheet right away, that will just keep getting used and just it can be updated as it needs to be. But just one person needs to kind of go out on the whim and create that so that they have kind of a good transition binder for the next position or the next person.